Chapter 50. The time of tangibles is over. The birds of Kwajalein Atoll had never seen humans before. Only their distant ancestors had, way back when humans were mortal and the atoll had not been erased from the world. Once humans arrived, however, the birds were quick to adapt. When the docks were built, gulls learned to wait there for when the ships started their engines. The propellers churned up the water and brought hundreds of disorientated fish to the surface. Easy pickings. The sparrows learned that the eaves of the newly constructed homes were miraculously protected spots under which to build nests. And the pigeons learned that public spaces were awash with breadcrumbs and French fries. Then, when strange conical towers began to rise on the islands, the birds paid them no mind. These things, like everything else the humans built, became part of the scenery, accepted at face value, and incorporated into the wildlife's limited concept of the world. The birds were blissfully unaware of the Thunderhead and its influence over them. They did not know about the canister of nanites that had arrived 3 years ago, a can so small it could be held in a human hand like a soft drink. But once it was opened, the nanites inside were released and began to multiply. They were genetically coded to infuse each individual species on the island, and although complex wireless signals were confounded by interference, the simple ones got through. The nanites did not make the wildlife immortal, but the creatures of the atoll would no longer suffer from disease. They could be tracked, and when necessary, controlled. The Thunderhead influenced their behavior in simple ways to make life easier for everyone and everything on the atoll. The birds never noticed a difference between natural instincts and the Thunderhead's hand in their hearts, such as the way they all developed a sudden aversion to perching on sensitive equipment or in other places where their presence might pose a problem. And on the day when every winged species felt a sudden overwhelming urge to leave and fly to a different atoll, they made the journey without question. For how could they question a desire that seemed to come from within? Although Ronglap, Lykeep, and the various atolls they escaped to had no roof eaves or French fries or docks with dorsal-orientated fish, it was no consequence to the birds. They would learn to adapt. The holds of the cradles were fully locked before dawn, and at 6 a.m., Cirrus was delivered by old-school cables onto each ship. When the upload was complete and the cables disconnected, the Ciri were cut off from the world. 42 identical siblings, never to experience the Earth again. As the sun rose, the workers on the atoll rested, but their sleep was not an easy one. The scheduled launch was only a day away. One day to reconcile their past with their future. With only 1,200 people in the atoll, there was room for everyone on the ships. And only now did they realize that they weren't chosen to come here just for their skills. These were all people for whom the world had lost its luster. Which is why, when given the option to return home and resume their lives, so many of them chose not to do it. The ones who remained were, by and large, ready for this. And many had already fantasized about being part of the crews while building the vessels. Even so, a giant leap for mankind was no small step for man. The Thunderhead estimated that when the time came to board, about 70% would choose to go, and that was more than enough. The rest would have to vacate the islands for launch and watch from a safe distance. Rowan and Citra spent the rest of the night and morning asleep in each other's arms. For the first time in ages, they seemed to not have a care in the world. They were the only ones. Faraday returned to Munera at sunrise, pounding on her door until she let him in. "I've deciphered it," she told him, clearly having been up all night working on it. "It's eye-opening," she said. "The failsafe exists, although Da Vinci never said what it does." But before he even stepped inside, Faraday held something out to her that caught the early morning sunlight, refracting it in shifting patterns on her front door. A scythe ring. Munera gave him a half-hearted smile. "If this is a proposal," she said, "shouldn't you be on one knee?" "I propose," he said, "that you take your rightful place among us. I am deeply sorry to have left you yesterday, Munera, I was overwhelmed, and I am not the most perfect of men." "No," she admitted. "You're not, but you're better than most, if you don't count the last 3 years." "Point taken," Faraday said. "This ring was Scythe Anastasia's, but Scythe Anastasia will no longer be with us. So, tell me, Munera, who will you be?" She took the ring, turned it in her hand, and thought about it. "I had my patron historic all picked out that day they denied me the ring," she told him. "Bathsheba. She was the obsession of one king and the mother of another. A woman in a patriarchal society who still managed to change the world. Her son was Solomon the Wise. So you could say she was the mother of wisdom." Munera looked at the ring for a long moment, then gave it back to Faraday. "The invitation is enough," she said. "But if I truly am to be the mother of wisdom, I have to be wise enough to know that I can't covet this ring anymore." Faraday smiled with understanding and slipped the ring back into a pocket in its robe. "It would have been nice to know Honorable Scythe Bathsheba, but I'm much happier knowing that Honorable Munera Atrushi. Grayson. Grayson." He wasn't quite ready to get up. He could tell he hadn't had much sleep, but he hadn't expected much. With less than 24 hours to launch, there'd be a lot to do, and a lot to consider, like whether or not he would go. "Grayson." He had done what he needed to do, and although there wasn't much tying him to the world now, there wasn't much pushing him off it either. He could be anywhere, because wherever he was, he'd be forging a whole new life for himself. "Grayson." And then there was Jerry. He couldn't quite make out his feelings for Jerry, other than that he had them. Where that would lead was still anyone's guess. "Grayson." He finally rolled over and looked to the Thunderhead's camera. Its voice was particularly grating today as it came through the tiny speaker of a landline squawk box. "Good morning," he said. "What time is—" "I am thinking that a journey would be a good idea at this time," the Thunderhead said. "Yeah, I know," said Grayson, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. "Just let me take a shower and—" "Of course, you can do that if you wish, but I don't think you're hearing me," the Thunderhead said, and suddenly got louder, much louder. "I'm thinking that a journey for everyone on the atoll would be a good idea. I'm thinking it would be an extremely good idea right now." Loriana hadn't even tried to sleep. How could she? Until today, she was just a communications guru, but after last night, everyone was looking to her for answers. "It will be simple," Cirrus had told her shortly before being loaded onto the ships. "People can choose to go, or they can choose to stay. If they stay, they'll need to clear the launch zone until after all the ships have launched, either by boat or by taking refuge on Abaddon, which is the only island in the atoll that's far enough away. If they choose to go, have them provide a list of who they wish to travel with. Everyone may bring one backpack, no larger than 20 liters. That's all? The time of tangibles is over, Cirrus said. Anything else they wish to remember? I already have images of it in my back brain. Loriana couldn't stop pacing. What about pets? They will be accommodated in place of a backpack. Can people choose their destinations? If we allowed that, everyone would sign up for the nearest planet. I'll announce the destination and the length of the journey once we've left. Will you go, Loriana? I don't know. There's no rush, said Cirrus. You'll all have a day to make up your mind. Right. All day to make up the most important decision of her life. A decision that could not be undone. She would never see her parents, or anyone she knew before arriving on the atoll, ever again. She was leaning handily toward no. Cirrus was gone now, uploaded onto the ships, luxuriating in its own backbrain. Or backbrains, since there were now dozens of it. Them. Now Loriana had to be the authority answering people's questions. And then the Toll showed up at launch control, not looking much like the Toll without his fancy accoutrements. He was out of breath and looked like he was trying to outrun a scythe. Turns out, she wasn't far off the mark. That morning, Citra brought Rowan to the bunker to show him what she and Faraday had discovered, only to find that Munera and Faraday were already there. Munera looked her up and down. You surrendered your ring, but you're still wearing your robe, Munera pointed out. Old habits die hard, said Faraday, and laughed at his own pun. The truth was, Citra's only change of clothes was on the container ship, and she wasn't going back there. She was sure she'd find something before the launch, and if not, there'd be clothes on board, because if there was one thing the Thunderhead was good at, it was attention to detail. Rowan looked at the transmitter through the dusty glass. Old technology? Lost technology, Faraday corrected. At least lost to us. We can't even be sure what it does. Maybe it kills bad scythes, Munera suggested. No, said Rowan. That would be me. There was something on the edge of Citra's hearing that only now caught her attention. She cocked her head to listen. Do you hear that? Said Citra. It sounds like some sort of alarm. Loriana tripped the tsunami alarm on every island of the atoll, although the wave that was coming wasn't coming by sea. How sure are you about this? She asked the toll. I'm positive, he said, still out of breath. Is this as bad as I think it is? Worse. And so she fired up the loudspeaker. Attention! Attention! Her voice rose above the alarm. Scythes are headed our way. Repeat, scythes are headed our way. The entire atoll has been marked for gleaning. She heard her own words echoing outside, and it chilled her. She muted the microphone and turned to the toll. How long have we got? I have no idea, the toll said. Didn't the Thunderhead tell you? Grayson huffed in frustration. It can't interfere with Scythe affairs. Great, said Loriana. If the Thunderhead could break its own rules just once, our lives would be so much easier. That was true, but in spite of how maddening it was, Grayson knew a deeper truth. If it could break its own rules, it wouldn't be the Thunderhead, he said. It would just be a scary AI. She flicked the microphone back on. We have less than an hour, she announced. Either find a way off the atoll now, or get to one of the ships. Any of them, as soon as you can. Because we're launching early. She turned off the microphone. The Thunderhead couldn't interfere, and the Siri were all snug and secure aboard the ships. They were on their own. This is not how it was supposed to go. She looked at the launch control screen before her. A map showed the position of each ship. Not a single living soul on any of them yet. The farthest ships will take at least 45 minutes to get to, she told the toll. Let's hope I wasn't lying about the time. The announcement was greeted first with disbelief, then confusion, then panic. Within minutes, everyone mobilized. Many had not yet made their decision, but now the decision had been made for them. Years in space, or death by scythe. Suddenly, the choice wasn't very hard at all. If the Thunderhead could have seeded the sky and coaxed cloud cover to hide the atoll from view, it would have. But it still did not have influence over weather in the blind spot. But then again, even if it did, it could still do nothing. Any attack on Quagillan would be a scythe action. Just as the Thunderhead could not intervene on the moon, or Mars, or the orbital station, it could not lift a finger to stop this. All it could do was watch everything it had worked for to be destroyed once again. The Thunderhead knew no hatred, but thought that perhaps, by the end of this day, it might. Attention! The ships on EB and the main island are at capacity. Do not attempt to board. Repeat, do not attempt to board. Head north and west. It's Goddard, said Citra. It has to be. Rowan and Citra hurried down the main street of the big island, caught up in the frantic exodus. We don't know that for sure, Rowan said. I know it is, said Citra. I can practically smell him. I don't know who he wants more, you or me. Rowan stopped to take a good look at her. I'll stay and fight him, if you want me to. No, she said. That's what he does, Rowan. He draws us in, over and over. But now, we have a chance to show the world not just that we don't need the Scythum, but that we never did. This could have been our destiny if the Scythum hadn't prevented it, and it still can be. That's the fight I want, not sparring endlessly with Goddard. Now Rowan was grinning, and when Citra looked around, she saw that a dozen others were listening. Not just moved, but ready to follow her anywhere. "You could have been one hell of a high blade," he said. They jumped in the bed of a truck heading toward the Northern Isles. There was one road that bridged all the islands. Today, it was an escape route. There were 3 others in the pickup with them, starstruck by the company, so Citra smiled warmly and reached out a hand. "Hi, I'm Citra Terranova. Looks like we're riding together today." And although they were a bit confused, they were happy to shake her hand. "Attention! Attention! All ships south of Big J and Legon are at capacity, and too many of you are heading to the Western Isles. Head north if you can." Jerry was awakened by the same alarm that woke most everyone, and although Jerry couldn't quite hear the announcement from the cargo ship, clearly it was nothing good. When Jerry opened the cabin door, a rat ran in. Jerry was startled, and then saw that the hallway, indeed the entire ship, was full of them. Not just rats, but goats, wild pigs, and even what appeared to be house pets. Rather than being put off, Jerry was a bit amused, remembering the warning that Cirrus had given. It didn't take much to put 2 and 2 together. All the wildlife within the launch zones would most certainly be killed by the launches. Naturally, the Thunderhead had devised a solution and gathered them using their own control nanites. When Jerry went down the gangway, it had already been pulled in, but ropes were still wrapped around the mooring bollards. Whatever this alarm was, it made the dock workers abandon their work midway through. Jerry jumped the short distance from the hatch to the pier, and upon rising, saw Grayson running down the jetty, stumbling in pants that were a little too big. So was the shirt he wore. Both probably found items from wherever he had spent the night. "The Thunderhead said you'd be here. They pushed up the launch. Scythes are on the way to glean the island." Jerry sighed. "Of course they are." They both looked at the ship. Jerry could sail with it to wherever it was programmed to go, but Jerry had no desire to be a passive passenger again. There'd be a speedboat somewhere that Jerry could pilot away from the atoll when the time came. "Come, help me," Jerry said. Together they untied the ropes from the bollards. The ropes rolled themselves in, and the ship, on autopilot, began to move itself away from the dock. Around them, the alarms still blared. Loriana's dire announcements still came. And Jerry and Grayson were left looking at each other in an awkwardness that felt embarrassingly trivial, considering their great current situation. "I will miss you, Grayson Tolliver." "I'll miss you too, Jerry," Grayson said. "You'd better hurry and get to a ship." That caught Jerry by surprise. "Wait, but I'm not going." "You're not?" Grayson said. "Neither am I." They stared dumbly at each other again, with a slightly different brand of awkwardness. Then, Jerry turned toward the container ship. It was already too far from the pier to make it a viable option for them now. Besides, Jerry was sure that Grayson had no desire to be a post-mortal Noah any more than Jerry did. Being the toll had most certainly checked the box on Grayson's card for holy religious figure. "We should help the others," Grayson said. "It's out of our hands now. There's nothing more we can do," Jerry pointed out. "Then we should find ourselves a place that's safe." "Who wants to be safe?" said Jerry. "Let's find ourselves a good place to watch the launch." "Attention! Attention! All ships south of Mech and east of Nell are at capacity. Anyone with a boat fast enough to reach Ro, Numor, and Inyumbur should head there now." Loriana kept her eyes on the map. Some ships were lit red, which meant they were full capacity, every space taken, but unable to launch. Some were yellow, particularly filled with room for more. But at least 15 of the outermost ships were not lit at all, which meant no one was inside yet. And not a single one of them showed green. "Why won't the ships launch?" she heard someone say. Loriana turned to see Sikora behind her. "The ships that are ready need to launch," he said. "They can't," Loriana told him. "Even with flame trenches to deflect the fire, most everything on the atoll will be destroyed. But the Thunderhead can't kill anyone in the process. It won't launch until the launch zones are clear, even if that means the Scythes get here first." She zoomed in on one of the ships. Sure enough, there were still people on the roadways trying to get to the ships. people in the streets scrambling to leave their homes. She widened to the larger map. Still, not a single green spot. Not a single ship was clear to blast off. Sikora considered it, then nodded seriously. Tell people they'll be incinerated if they don't get out of the way. But they won't be. They don't know that, said Sikora. Luriana, why do you think the Thunderhead needed Nimbus agents? To tell the people things they needed to hear, even when it wasn't strictly the truth. Then Sikora looked at the screen and marveled. You supervised this entire thing from the beginning? Right behind my back? More like under your nose, she said. He sighed. And I built a really nice hotel. She smiled at him. Yes, Bob, you did. Sikora took a deep breath, let it out, and took a good look at her. You should go, Luriana. Get to a ship before the scythes arrive. Someone has to stay here at launch control to tell people where they should go. I'll do it, Sikora said. Ordering people around is what I do best. But allow me to be useful, Luriana. Please. Luriana couldn't argue, because she knew that feeling. Wanting to be useful. Knowing if she was, or if anything she did would be noticed. Yet, the Thunderhead had chosen her for this, and she had risen to the occasion. What was Sikora doing now, if not trying to rise to this one? Launch control is soundproof and insulated, she told him. It will be one of the only safe places on the island, so keep that door sealed and stay inside. Got it. Keep coasting people toward the empty ships. They don't need to be full, they just have to have a presence, and do what you can to clear out the launch zones. I'm on it, Sikora said. And that's it. Now you're in charge of the big picture. She looked at the map and pointed to an island to the north. I can make it to Omelek. There are 3 ships there, and still room on all 3. Sikora wished her luck, and she hurried out the emptying streets, leaving Sikora to watch the screen, microphone in hand, waiting for the ships to go green. Hey friends, narrator here. I know this is probably maybe the 5th or even the 6th chapter I've probably said this now, but everything's coming to a head. These groups that were all separated, Scythe Anastasia, Rowan, Goddard, even Jerry, and if you kind of look at it from a different perspective, even Munera or Luriana. All of these groups are now together on this island, or headed to this island in this case of Goddard. So, everything's coming to a head, and we're now finally just down to 2 factions, ready to see how it shakes out. And with the Thunderhead's non-interference, I wonder how Goddard's arrival is going to go. I'm hoping Jerry has a plan. In any case, thanks for listening. Next up is Chapter 51, on the sabotage of dreams. Bye.